Mhm.
Assalamu alaikum and very good evening. Welcome to the international webinar on tips and techniques of online assessment organized by Faculty of Business, Northern University, Bangladesh. It's a live telecast from the official Facebook page of NUB Business School. Due to COVID-19 pandemic situation, new technological requirements got involved with learning and evaluation process. Educational institutions are also accepted this new technology-based system as their sector has to keep pace with the present time. In other words, the traditional teaching and assessment process is being replaced by the latest system, the online teaching and online assessment. Conducting tests nowadays are not so stressful. Conducting online assessment has become easier day by day. Exams are conducted on a computer, which ultimately saves not only time, but also become more convenient. That's why the online method is accepted by every educational institute nowadays. As a result, we can improve the effectiveness of online assessment techniques by identifying the areas of improvements. Today, different dynamic tips and techniques of this issue will be talked by our honorable guests and resource persons. It's a great honor for me to introduce the name of main patron of today's webinar, Professor Dr. Abu Yusuf Muhammad Abdullah, Honorable Chairman, Northern University Bangladesh Trust. We are very pleased and honored that two internationally recognized resource persons are present with us who are going to share their valuable contemporary ideas and experiences on today's theme. Today, we get Dr. Francisco Cornell, Professor, Business Administration, Hampton University, Virginia, USA. Since 1977, Dr. Cornell excellence in teaching, research, consulting, and doing minority outreach spans multiple locations in the US and other countries such as Argentina, Bangladesh, Brazil, Canada, Chile, China, Ecuador, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, Monaco, Nicaragua, Peru, Spain, and Venezuela. He completed his doctoral degree in marketing from Herman C. Crenard Graduate School of Management, Hood University, West Lafayette, India. Completed masters both in mathematical statistics and business administration from Columbia University, New York, and completed his Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from MIT, Cambridge. He has taught in different world-famous universities, especially MIT, Purdue, University of Wisconsin, Loyola Marymount University, University of California at Davis, etc. He has authored and co-authored numerous journals, articles, and maintained relevant research programs, and one book of marketing management published by Prentice Hall. Dr. Cornell has served the African American community since 1990 as professor, chairman, assistant dean, executive director of international office, and faculty trustee at Hampton University. Moreover, he was the E.L. Ham Distinguished Professor Awardee. Welcome, Dr. Cornell, in our today's webinar. Today, we also have Dr. Sita Vanka, Professor, School of Management Studies, University of Hyderabad, India. She was former dean at the School of Management Studies. She is also a joint professor of Women's Studies in the Center for Women's Studies of this university. She has over 3 decades of teaching and research experiences in different areas of general management, women's studies, human resource management, entrepreneurship, and educational management. She completed both her doctoral degree and MA from Osmania. Her academic contribution brought her membership for several professional associations and accreditation agencies like NBA, UGC committees, NBC, etc. She also represents on many advisory committees and boards of studies of various universities and institutions in India. She is involved in teaching, training, consulting, and research in management for her huge contribution. She also got different awards also. Today, Professor Dr. Anwar Hussain, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Northern University, Bangladesh, is present as the program chair. Professor Dr. Nazrul Islam, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor and Dean, Faculty of Business, Northern University, Bangladesh, is present with us as the chair of technical session. Honorable guests, this is Farzana Chaudhary, Senior Lecturer, Northern University, Bangladesh. Welcome you once again for today's international session. Today's program is divided into 2 parts. Now we are going to start our first part inaugural session. At the very beginning, may I request Dr. Ikramul Islam, Professor and Treasurer of Northern University, Bangladesh, for his welcome speech.
Thank you, Farzana Chaudhary, for giving me the opportunity to deliver my welcome speech. We are very much aware that the entire planet is going through a COVID-19 pandemic situation. And unfortunately, we have lost our huge lives of our near and dears. In Bangladesh, the first COVID victim was identified in March 8, 2020. And from 2020, 17th March, Bangladesh government gone through a very strict lockdown. And educational institution also under the lockdown. But fortunately, under the leadership of our dynamic chairman in Northern University Bangladesh Trust, Professor A.Y.M. Abdullah, from the very next day, we started our online classes. But at the very beginning, there was certain reluctancy among the student teachers, even to the guardians. Basically, they were concerned all basically two things. Number one, what will be the quality of education? And number two, what will be the assessment ways of assessment and grades? As the change was very radical changes, therefore we have to learn a huge, we have to gather knowledge to manage this. And in order to gather knowledge and perform our academic activities properly and efficiently, Department of Business Administration, Northern University Bangladesh arranged this very nice webinar on tips and techniques of online assessment. Today, we are very much lucky to announce that we have with us Professor Dr. Anwar Hussain, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Northern University Bangladesh. We have Professor Dr. Nazrul Islam, Session Chair of this webinar and Pro Vice Chancellor of Northern University Bangladesh. We have very renowned personalities, Professor Francisco Cornell of Hampton University, and also Professor Shita Banka, University of Hyderabad, India, to provide the deep insight of online assessment. This webinar will be helpful and beneficial to the stakeholders. With few words, I'm welcoming all of you to this very important webinar on tips and techniques of online assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. At this moment, may I request our Honorable Session Chair, Professor Dr. Anwar Hussain, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Northern University Bangladesh, for his valuable words.
Thank you, Farjana. First of all, I would like to welcome you all in this two-continent webinar that we are organizing, and wonderful presence of two scholars from all the way from half of the world distance, Professor Francisco Cornell, Professor of Virginia, Hampton University, Virginia, and Professor Shita Vanka, whom I know previously in our academic pursuit from University of Hyderabad. And that is also a very friendly country to Bangladesh. And we also sympathize for the lots of lives that has been lost due to COVID onslaught. Same thing also happened in Bangladesh also. And we expect the world will be adjust to the new normal and get rid of this menace very soon. I also recall with gratitude our chief guest of today's program, Professor Abdullah, but due to his very pressing, emergency work, he has apologized not to attend. So I pay sincere thanks to him for his, blessings for this webinar. I would like to thank our Professor Dr. Nazrul Islam, the chief architect of today's webinar, is the dean and also the pro-vice of the university. So he has been arranging every month a very interesting and relevant topics for webinar, drawing on the scholars from home and abroad to enlighten and educate our students and faculty members. And this is a unique opportunity to listen to a very contemporary issue that is also bugging all of us. The issue of assessment during the online teaching, initially the very system of online teaching was taken into a lot of distrust by the faculty members, students, the government, ministry, even University Grants Commission. but it is the private university that took the initiative to switch on to online teaching from the day one, so that our education system continues. I'm really sorry to say that the public university in Bangladesh has not been able to cope up with this new situation, new normal situation, compared to the private universities. They're still lagging behind, and still they have not been able to switch over to online teaching, let alone online assessment. Now, there is a big critique on online assessment of the students, because the critics will normally say there are scopes for plagiarism, the scope for faking the answer, the scope for manipulating, all sorts of issues that will downgrade the quality of the assessment. So this is a really puzzling problem for us, and we have been trying desperately to tackle this issue. And we are glad that we have now two scholars from India and also from America who will be enlightening us on these issues. I know the first world, they're already using different kind of techniques and tips for the faculty members, how to go on properly assessing the students' merit and also his knowledge and his way of answering the questions. We maybe still have some doubts about the total sanctity of the assessment. But in a situation which is as disparate as the COVID-19 situation for us, what else we could do? So I hope this evening's program, sorry it is evening in our place, but it is the morning in Dr. Francisco Cornell's country. So we'll be mixing up these two situations together. And I believe that our students, our faculty members, and ourselves will be much wiser after the deliberation of these two learned and very reputed scholars. I will not go on prolonging my speech, because in a webinar, we are here to listen, to learn from the experts. And this is the real purpose. And I will request my colleagues so that in future they talk less and allow the invited guests to speak more. With these few words, I thank once again the business school, the faculty members, and also particularly Professor Nazrul, and also our two learned guest speakers of today for their effort and support to our cause. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable word. And with the speech of our Honorable Session Chair, the inaugural part of today's session has completed. Dear participants, the link is given in our chat box for e-certificate. Kindly fill up the link. Now we are going to start our technical session, I mean to say our second part of today's international webinar, where our honorable research persons will focus different tips and techniques on online assessment. Our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Nazrul Islam, sir, will handle this session. Sir, I'm humbly requesting you to start the second part of today's webinar. Over to you.
Thank you, Farzana. First of all, I would like to welcome you all to this very important and contemporary webinar on tips and techniques of online assessment, organized by Northern University, Bangladesh. Dear colleagues, you know that COVID-19 affected our teaching and learning process in higher educational institutions, and 2/3 of classroom teaching has been replaced by distance teaching and learning. The shift from face-to-face to distance teaching did not come without challenge. The main challenges are being access to technical infrastructure, competencies, and pedagogies for distance learning, and the requirements of specific fields of studies. But the main challenges of higher educational institutions are not only those, but to ensure quality in teaching learning process and quality in assessment systems, which are questioned by the stakeholders. Under these circumstances, the higher educational institutions are struggling to make different online-based methods effective to teach and assess the performance of their students. Therefore, the challenge is to improve the effectiveness of online assessment and make it acceptable to the students, to the guardians, and to the other stakeholders. dear colleagues and participants, today we have with us two senior and renowned resource persons from two continents, as mentioned by our Honorable Vice Chancellor, to speak on this interesting topic. Professor Dr. Francisco Cornell. Professor Francisco Cornell is a professor of Business Administration, Hampton University, Virginia, USA, and Professor Shita Bhanka. Professor Shita is a professor of School of Business Management Studies, University of Hyderabad, India. Now, I would like to start with Professor Dr. Francisco Cornell. You have heard about Professor Cornell. Professor Cornell did his PhD in marketing. He went to Purdue University for PhD. He went to MIT, went to Columbia University, and many other universities he studied. He has a vast experience in teaching, in consulting, in research, and publications. Professor Cornell, since 1977, Cornell's excellence in teaching, research, consulting, and doing minority outreach spans multiple locations in the US and other countries, even Bangladesh, such as Argentina, Bangladesh, Brazil, Canada, Chile, China, Ecuador, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, Monaco, Nicaragua, Peru, Spain, and Venezuela. Professor Cornell has taught at MIT, Purdue University, Purdue, University of Cincinnati, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Loyola, Marymount University, University of California at Davis, and now teaching in Hampton University, USA. He is a senior professor, renowned professor, has a vast experience on teaching and assessment process at the tertiary level of education. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Francisco Cornell to say something about on the topic tips and techniques of online assessment. Professor Francisco Cornell.
Okay. You're going to share the PowerPoint, correct, Nazrul?
Yeah, Ibrahim, can you please share the PowerPoint?
Perfect. Okay, excellent.
Yes, sir.
Well, here we are on a very important topic that is sponsored by one of, I said, the leading university in Bangladesh. Northern University, Bangladesh has taken the position of improving the education for all Bangladeshi people. As the previous administrator said, the private universities can move faster sometimes than other universities. And therefore, my topic will be on online assessment. Assessment is a very important process that can be displayed in four fundamental steps. First of all, we have to know where we are going. We have to have a specific written objectives. If a professor doesn't know where he wants to take his students, then the student might go anywhere. And at the end of the semester, there is confusion. So it is important that we share the objectives usually in the syllabus. And most of these objectives are very easy to accomplish because now all the publishers, all the books that come have objectives. So it's very easy. So it's not difficult. So second, we have to find ways to measure the extent to which students have met those objectives. So that's the green circle. Develop, select assessment measures. Now, how do we measure? It's very difficult to measure knowledge. I remember when I was young, I thought everybody learns like me or my brother, and kind of easy. I have one brother who doesn't study, but he learned just by listening, and he has this very perceptual skills. My other brother learns by reading mathematics and understanding the abstraction of it. And I learn with both ways, okay? So then we have to create experience leading to outcomes. That is the purple. And the outcomes should be for success for the students. And then discuss and use assessment results to improve learning. So that is what we call continuous improvement. We're always trying to make it better. Now, assessments in terms of the traditional mode of teaching, we all know it's somehow easier because we are looking at the student. We receive the feedback through their eyes or through their voices in class, and we can see that a student is not here, not there. In an online environment, and particularly when when you don't use Zoom, for example, initially I was very reluctant on using Blackboard because Blackboard only allowed me to use 2 students at a time. So I didn't know what the other students are doing. So some students could be taking a nap or watching Netflix. As a matter of fact, one of the students, when I asked, I was going to give an assignment. We can move to the next slide while I talk. Nazrul, move to the next, please. Next slide. So one day I asked, I go to the class, this is last year, okay, not this semester, but last semester. I asked the students, look, I'm going to give you an assignment, which is going to be different. There is a movie that I just saw called The Social Dilemma. And I said, but I will not want to assign you if for some reason, 1 or 2 of you does not have access to Netflix. So I said, please raise your hand if you have access to Netflix. And guess what the student said? All of them raised their hand. Okay, so all of them have access to Netflix. And one of the students says, Professor Coronel, as a matter of fact, I'm always watching Netflix when I'm in class. So I said, okay, no. That's not going to work in my class. So let's go back here. So the objectives should be intended to instructional outcomes. So what we want, specific and measurable, not broad and intangible, and then concerned with the student learning. It's not about us. It is not about us. Okay, next slide. So here, all of you are familiar with this scheme, which is we want to measure. So there are different levels of measurement. At the lowest level, we have measure of knowledge, comprehension, application next, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation to make a judgment. I focus on my graduate students in the Bloom taxonomy that we just saw. I focus on the latter one, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Do I check for knowledge? It's a given. The student has to come to my class having read the book, having done some short quizzes. Nowadays, most of the books come with Connect. Connect is a learning management system where, in fact, it is very easy for me to assign questions and multiple choice questions. And in fact, it is relevant for me whether they cheat or not, because it counts for 0 points. So that knowledge counts for 0 points. Then comprehension, there is some tutorials, then application, multiple choice, short answer, how do you solve this issue? How do you solve this problem? That counts. But my emphasis is on analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Are all the other prior steps important? Yes. Okay. So it all has to be controlled. There are 2 major types of assessment. We call them formative assessment and summative assessment. Informative assessment provides the students and instructors with timely and frequent feedback on mastery of course material and learning objectives. In essence, instructors are sampling student learning and providing feedback based on the result to modify instruction and learning experience. Students can use feedback to identify areas of weakness for further study. So that is where we share, okay? We share the basic knowledge about the material. But then summative assessment is when we understand, do they actually understand? Can they make a statement? Can they solve this issue? Can they transfer this knowledge to other areas? So that's summative assessment. Next one, please. Now, there are different ways. This summarizes very well the formative assessment on the left and the summative assessment on the right. But in fact, it is in the middle where we have to be, okay? It's a combination of both. So we have different ways to measure, and I will go into this a little bit later on, but then look at this. Case study. For graduate school, I focus on case study. And I focus on paper. They have to write paper. The self-assessment, I give very little weight to that, but it's important. Simulation, I like simulation, but simulation as of today is very expensive, okay? So with Prentice Hall, with all the other Pearson, if I ask my students for a simulation, they have to pay more. Right now, it's like for my graduate course, the cost of Connect is like $120. They can assume that with simulation, it would be more like $250. So that's too much. So there are some simulations that you can get for free, and I have shared some of those there. So there is a reflective journal that I usually use at the end of the semester so that the student can say, where did they start? What did they learn? And what is the outcome? So I learned a lot out of these reflective journals to update whatever works, whatever it doesn't work. But on the other hand, I also see how from a self-assessment, the student says, okay, at the beginning, I saw this as a just mathematics course. And then I realized that I needed this to do the evaluations for the cases or whatever analysis they were done. Then the summative assessment, we use project. Here is, go ahead, Nazrul, the next one. Yes, here is, I do not like this slide very much because it's too congested. So I'm just going to summarize, okay? You all have used discussion posts like boards, blogs, chats. So it's an opportunity, and then Professor Islam is going to share these slides with you. It was going to be a magnificent idea, so he asked me to share some information, so here it is. You probably have used most of this, okay? I use this to create collaboration among the students. They like it. They want to show, they want to share their knowledge. So it works so well. The discussion board is highly utilized. I use it a lot in different ways, in all ways, in fact. Everything has to be on the discussion board. If it is not in the discussion board, whether it is a project, it is a paper, it is not there. Okay, so I don't accept that they send an email. It has to be there. It has to be there. Unless it's a very sensitive issue, then I accept email. All right, so chats, all this is very important. Then we have the quizzes. In fact, the quizzes, I give zero points, as I told you, but they are very important. And the way I check is at the beginning, I give them the chance to do many times. Okay, they can take the quiz many times. So out of 25 points, I see that the students are getting 25. So after 3 quizzes, then I close the ability to redo multiple times. So they have to do only 2 times. And then at that point, they just don't get 25. Some get them 10 points, some of them get 15 points. And then at the third level, I just give them one choice or one chance to do the quiz, 25 questions again. Some people get 5 points, some people get 25 points, very rare, 25 points. And, but still it counts for 0 points. So they self-assess themselves with these short quizzes. And most of the time they, initially I use the test bank, but then I realized that they can use Check or other websites that they pay and they get all the answers. And in many cases, some of the answers are free. So I tweak it, I change the numbers, or I adapt to whatever I have taught in class. So there is some feedback. Then the midterm and final exams. This, I don't know what is the law in Bangladesh, but here, on an online assessment, I use Blackboard, of course, because it's required by our university, but then I use Respondus, where in fact, the camera is looking at the student. So if the student is watching, looking at somebody or listening to somebody, then it gives feedback. But in addition to Respondus, I ask the student to have their cell phone or some other laptop where they're using Zoom, and I see their workspace. So it's kind of like here. So they see the workspace. I see the workspace. So it's from a perspective. So it's all covered. Why I do this? Well, I do this because I'll explain later, okay? Then projects, I give them a lot of projects too. Do this, do that, calculate the consumer price index, and I individualize it. So the consumer price index, I said, this is the basket of goods. The basket of goods, and then where are you from? Somebody from Maryland, somebody from California. So I said, call your mother, ask her how she defined the basket of goods. So these projects they cannot cheat on this. They're different. Now the methodology is there. So in all my assignments, I try to avoid that they are copying something standard. It has to be, they have to learn the methodology, and if they follow the rubric that somebody else has done, it doesn't matter as long as they learn the material. Then portfolios I use very little, but I have a lot of colleagues, particularly in the arts, in graphic design, for example, that they use a lot of portfolio. But our students, as a matter of fact, through the program are required to build a portfolio. So my course and the course that I teach are part of the portfolio. So is their interviews is part of the portfolio. So is the internship part of the portfolio. So the portfolio counts only for 2% in my classes, where they upload whatever paper they want to showcase. And usually out of the 10, 12, 15 assignments that I give, they find where they got an A or they excel, so they show. So this is an opportunity for them to show to the world what they have accomplished. And then presentations, in all my classes, I have presentations. In all my classes, it's 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes, and in some cases, it's 25 minutes. Next one, Nazrul. Well, this is something that is very important, okay? As a matter of fact, I started talking about this and I said to Dr. Islam, let's move over, but this is what is important. And I have to emphasize at the beginning. I tell the students, look, in 1998, Time Magazine had an article. That is before we were teaching with, before all the digital culture started. In 1998, Time said that 98% of American high school students cheat. I mean, no cell phone, no cell phone. no laptop, and they were cheating, 98%, or plagiarize, copy the paper. Some of them didn't know that taking almost the whole paper from somebody else was plagiarizing. So at Hampton University, we distinguish ourselves for using the 3 C's. That means character building. And I emphasize that character building means doing the right thing when nobody is watching you. So I said, you can cheat, but you're cheating yourself, okay? So the other is culture and the other is community. Go back, Nazrul. Go back to the previous one. Okay, community engagement, that means networking. And we say, watch your back. We watch your back, but we don't watch your slack. So no slack. We watch your back, we help you, but not your slacks. If you want to go the wrong way, we're not going to save you. And then the culture is the university where I teach now is an African American university, but we have to emphasize there is not one black. There is the blacks from the East Coast, black from the West Coast, black from the world. So a world view. Next one, please. So this is where I put the most effort in my teaching, case study. The case studies can be used, I use both individual and group assessment. And then also the first one, it is the one that I present to the class, okay? And I say, read this and then write 2 lines on how you solve this problem. So then I train them how to analyze a case. I give them mathematical tools in other courses we have. It's very well developed by the courses, by the prerequisite. They have to take first accounting, finance, principles of marketing. And then when they come to me, they already know this material. So then we can apply. There is an issue whether this one, go ahead. For example, I use the case dermavescent, where we introduced the concept of cannibalization and the Ansov matrix. A lot of students don't understand that companies, they have to introduce new brands. Coca-Cola, classic. Then comes Diet Coke. Why? Because if they don't introduce that, then Pepsi-Cola will take that market segment. So the new brand is going to take products from the old brand, and that's okay. Our company will grow. So then how to use an Ansov matrix through the dermavescent. And Southwest, I show them how to use the power of Excel to calculate the daily operating profit through different routes, Los Angeles to San Francisco, et cetera, but use the power of Excel, and they love that, okay? Now, this is more the use of cases. All these cases to the left are cases in the book. And this is my approach to emphasize the global perspective of our education. The first cases are in the textbook, and they pick one case. It's sometimes individual, sometimes a group of 2 or 3 when the class is too big. But I've been fortunate last semester that I only had 15 students in each one of these classes. So I had like 20 cases. So I mean, the book had 32 cases, I'm sorry. So in one class, I gave 15, in the other class 15. So I still had 2 cases left. On the other hand, if you look at this, the case is Tesla. That is in the book. But now they have to create a new case. And the new case is Nayo. Why? Because I try to tell them we are competing with China. As a matter of fact, I put the word, we are at war with China. So they like that. When I put, we are at war with China, I don't tell them that we are at war with Bangladesh because they run scared. I mean, those Bangladeshi students, I don't know how they excel. I've seen so many of your students that are excelling in Minnesota, in Kentucky, in Florida. It's amazing. Your students are amazing when they come to the United States. It used to be that the Chinese students and the Indian students came and stay here and we could hire them. We cannot hire some Chinese professor anymore. We cannot hire Indian professors. And probably we'll be hiring now the best from Bangladesh, okay? Anyway, Ford versus Tata. The Tata case is not there, so they have to create this case. Costco versus Carrefour. Carrefour is not a case, so they have to create. All those on the right, the students have to create. And then at the bottom, I just put, I have many cases, but I just put Mattel, and the student has to find out what is the competition. So they find a competition from Italy or from Spain, TJX, and then Walt Disney competition from France, Asterix. So this is, there is no way for them to cheat, number one. And there is, they like it because they expand their global perspective. Next one, please. All right, so these are experiences and observations. So this is important in the sense that you want to emphasize how does this help or doesn't help them. The papers, in the papers, I have done a lot of different ways in which the students have to think outside of the box. I use this particularly in a course that is called International Management, okay, and International Marketing. The paper is a 10-page paper where we use the textbook for the terminology. And then I use a literature fiction book. And the student says, what? This is the School of Business and you are assigning me to read Les Miserables, you are assigning me to read this book by Victor Hugo or this book by the Nobel Prize winner, because the book has to be literature fiction written by a Nobel Prize winner or the best writer in that country. So when they take India, for example, they pick the book by Bikram, A Suitable Boy. So that's a big book. And so the assignment is kind of easy when you have a big book because there is a terminology of, let's say, 500 words that they learn in the course, and it's kind of easy to make a comparison to the book. Okay, so they learn the terminology and they expand their global perspective in literature. And then at the beginning, I got a lot of flack from even the other professors. I said, hey, this is a school of business and our students don't need to read literature. I said, well, they were supposed to read that when they were in English 101, English 102, but they never assigned the big books. And the more you learn the language, the more you learn other cultures, the better you can apply. So that counts only for about 5 to 10% of the grade, but now the students like it, okay? So simulation, as I told you, I don't use that much simulation. Next one, please. Yeah, simulation, I don't use that very much because it still is kind of expensive. I have used simulation in the past when they gave me the pilot versions, and then the reflective journal, as I told you, I have used it. So I think that's basically it. I could say that the assessment in an online environment has become so good in the last 2 years. But distant education, my colleagues, has been in existence since the 1800s, in 1868. Okay, so distance education, I remember in the 1960s, one of my brothers, because my father said, look, I don't know whether you're going to be an engineer or not, it's too expensive. I'd rather that you be an electrician. So he was in high school, he was the second year of high school. And my father told me that, yeah, you want to be an electrician? To my father, no, 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 I don't want to be an electrician. I'm going to be a mathematician. Okay, so he says, you're going to start by being a mathematician. You're not, nobody's going to hire you. So I don't care. I said, I don't care. So, but my brother was a little bit second one. He said, okay, he listened. And then my father bought this correspondence program that was sent from the United States to Peru in Spanish to learn how to be an electrician. So he had to take the test, and then he was honest. So distance learning has been with us for a long period of time. The evaluation have taken different ways. I remember when I was teaching at IIT, the Illinois Institute of Technology, I was in the School of Business, and then the next building was the distance education. And I saw later on, I saw some people that got their masters in electrical engineering from IIT, and they were doing fantastically well. They were teaching at that time with television. They broadcast through television, and they got the assessment via written mail. Okay, just the regular mail. Now, I think we have a lot of tools, and you will be more surprised when you hear Dr. Sita. She's an outstanding, she has an outstanding experience in the Bangladesh, the Indian environment, and you will be dumbfounded. You will be impressed. Okay, so this was my preview. Some people think they say you're not American. How come you be American? You look like Chinese. Well, unfortunately, I'm an American, or fortunately. Okay, guys, I think I now wait for Dr. Sita Vanka, and then maybe later on we take some questions. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Francisco Cornell, for excellent presentation and sharing your valuable experience with our colleagues and with our faculty members. Thank you very much for sharing this valuable experience. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Sita Vanka. She is a professor of School of Management Studies, University of Hyderabad, India. Professor Sita is the former dean at this school, and she is also a joint professor of Women's Studies in the Center for Women's Studies of University of Hyderabad, India. She has over 3 decades of teaching and research experience in different areas of general management, then women studies, human resources management, entrepreneurship, and educational management. She completed both her doctoral degree and MA from Osmania, and her academic contributions brought her membership of several professional associations and accreditation agencies like NBA, UGC committees, NBC, etc. Professor Sita also represents on many advisory committees and boards of studies of various universities and institutions of India. She is involved in teaching, training, consulting, and research in management. And for her huge contribution, she got different awards in different times. Professor Sita, thank you very much for joining with us. Professor Sita, now I request you to present your paper.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. So, well, my co-panelist, Professor Cornell, whose presentation experiences have been a good learning event for me. I would also rather use, although we use most of the things, business management is universal, so at the, I think, I request the audience to bear some kind of a repetition, because, whatever we say, our experiences will have content which he's already, spoken about. But all the same, let me at the outset thank Professor Abdullah, the chairman of Northern University, Professor Anwar Hussain, Vice Chancellor, whom I know very well and met a number of times, Vice Chancellor of Northern University. Professor Nazrul is somebody whom we always meet. Thanks, he always comes and meets me whenever he comes to MDSA, and the affection, the respect that he shows, I reciprocate the same. Let me also kind of remember respected Professor Shahid, whose invitation his students PhD Viva is what I was there in Bangladesh.
Yeah. Shahiduddin Ahmed, Professor Shahiduddin Ahmed.
Yes,
Professor
yes.
Shahiduddin Ahmed, yeah.
Shahiduddin Ahmed, yeah. So he has been, very nice, very kind, and Professor Rab again, whom I respect a lot. Professor Mannan, for that matter. Yeah. So all of them have visited our university, and they have also I had a chance to meet all of them on when I visited Bangladesh, excepting Professor Mannan, who went to Chittagong for Eid. I came around the Eid time and he went to Chittagong at that time. So I really share a number of happy memories of all of you, and I thank all of you for having given me this opportunity to share my experience. Well, a few disclaimers even before I start off my presentation. Let me just pull out my presentation. Oh, I think the host has to give me I think you have to make me host to share my presentation.
I think you have given permission.
But I don't have the. Yes, I have the share screen. Yes, yes.
Please.
Yes, yes, yes. So that way, when we talk about the tips and techniques of online assessment, let me tell you let me a few disclaimers before I just go ahead with this. I'll be sharing my experience today. What happened to this? Yes, I'll be sharing my experience today, and whatever I have drawn, and whatever. Are you able to see my?
No, we
No?
cannot see. We cannot see your slide.
I think something has been done. I'm sharing anyway.
As I started screening share, it is written
Yes,
here.
yes,
Shita
I
has
did
started.
that.
So you
Are you
can
able
go
to see it now?
Yes, now okay, okay.
Okay,
Fine.
so yeah, I would be sharing my experience. Second is whatever I have drawn, I have taken from the research and studies to support and structure my views and the statements that I have made. I'm not speaking anything which is my own, excepting my experience. Well, assessment is part of our academic work, but being a part of the committees at the national level enriches our experience, and that is where I think I draw my strength and the confidence to go about with whatever I'm talking about today. Well, as part of introduction, I think this is how I would go about. I would just introduce and say what is assessment, etc. What is a student perspective as far as assessment is concerned? Why do we need assessment? I will not elaborate because Professor Cornell has already spoke about the purpose of assessment. There is a framework which gives, Carlos is one who has given a framework which helps us a lot in assessment. I will also talk a little bit about how do we as teachers design the tasks. Well, Bloom's taxonomy is a starting point for anyone who would talk about, how we would look at the student and how we would look at assessment. We will look at the techniques, tools, and some tips out of my experience. We will see how we can safeguard and secure the academic integrity of us as, and then, conclude it. Well, by way of introduction, let me tell you that assessment is a very crucial element in enhancing the overall quality of teaching. This is extremely important in the teaching learning process as far as higher education is concerned. This is what stares, at us and talks about us as teachers, good or bad. And this is where I think the significance lies. And what and how students learn depends to a major extent on how they think they will be assessed. This is what Brigg and Tang in 2000 said. How the students would learn depends to a major extent on how, how they think they will be assessed. So all assessments lead to some amount of, definitely a student learning, but the fundamental challenge lies in stimulating the right kind of learning. So this is where it's a challenge in front of the teachers. So it's very important that assessment practices are designed and that they send right signals to the students as to what they should learn, how they should learn, and what will happen, what the consequences if they are able to learn, what is told. From the student perspective, what is the student looking at? From the student's perspective, there was a study by Matt Modern in 2015. He says that the relationship between learning and assessment often comes down to one thing as far as the student is concerned, and that is, what is my grade? This is what is the concern of the student. And this problem arises because an assessment is usually about, several things at once. That means we look at an assessment about several things. We will look at, what are all those things that we as teachers are looking at when we're trying to assess. And Bound, in a very good seminal paper in 2000, refers to this as, the double duty for teachers. How is it a double duty? It's about grading on one hand, that is sitting on judgment over what has been learned by the student, and about how do we give him or her effective learning. So this is one side of the story. The second that, teachers do is they evaluate the student achievements, and, they also see how students can be, taught better. That means, for example, a continuous assessment that goes on. Continuous assessment goes on, as Professor Cornell also said. This is a case which is given in every class, and this class is led by one student, and all other students would look at the case, contribute, and also critique the presentation. So this is where we are looking at evaluating student achievement and teaching them better. So class after class, we expect them to learn, newer things through the process they undergo. And on the one side, as teachers, we are evaluating them. On the other side, as teachers, we are also trying to teach them better on their different levels of comprehension, knowledge, and the rest of this. Next is, how do we take care of the standards? Professor Cornell did speak about the 3 C's of, HU. So the Hampton University standards are very clear, and that was, told. So too any university for that matter. I'm sure Northern University has certain standards, and so too, at our university, which is University of Hyderabad. So how do we take care of these standards, and then, how do we kind of take care what invokes the comparisons between individuals. That means, when we are talking about standards, we are applying the same metric for everyone, but then what comes from the student, what is the how, when we compare the individuals, they are different. So how do we kind of ensure that these standards are met, and standards on the one hand, and how do we do it when we are sitting in judgment over the students? It communicates explicit and hidden messages, no doubt about it. We when we say so and so is a topper, or so and so is relatively, in the 10% or 20% or 30% of the class, there is something where we are sending very strong signals. So why do we need assessments at all? Assessments have multiple purposes. As I said, I will not elaborate. Assessments do give feedback on whatever has been learned in the class. They facilitate improvement, no doubt about it, because we tell them this is how you have to do. For example, continuous assessment, when we talk about how students lead and what are the gaps and how they can overcome those gaps. So this is something which is feedback given, which facilitates improvement in them, and which will also measure achievement, because we are grading them. It is a continuous assessment, so we are grading them, we are measuring their achievement, motivating learning and maintaining standards. We are also motivating them to do better by giving them feedback. And then we are also trying to look at the standards that the university stands for, the values that the university stands for, and also our own personal standards and personal values based on the effort that we put in as teachers. So this is why assessment is done. Careless is one. Not only that, this is one side of the story, but as teachers, we also worry so much about the quality of the assessment. When we talk about assessment, teachers are more bothered about the quality. Professor Cornell was also very clear when he said that, and rather than the quantity. So well-designed assessment tasks will influence the way in which the students approach the problems, and so that improves the quality of learning. So what happens is, when an assessment is constructed, this is done to maximize the opportunities for students to get a very meaningful learning, and this is known as the learning-oriented assessment by Carles. Carles, in another good paper in 2007, talks about it as a learning-oriented assessment. This framework is what I had put it here. When we talk about Carles's framework, we see the way the students are looking at it. The student would look at a certification, a certificate, a degree that he gets, whereas a teacher is more bothered about the learning that goes into that assessment, whatever the process that the teacher is taking. So that way, when we talk about the student perspective, it is a degree, the terminal degree or the certificate, and the teacher is more bothered about the learning process. When students also, when students do come and ask us about, when we ask students about what are their expectations, why did they join the course in their orientation, they would tell us, number one is, well, this university is very good, number one. Second is, they would say that, we're looking at a good placement. We're looking at a good degree, so that gives us good placement. So what do we say as teachers? We say you go through the process in the first, second, third, fourth semesters. And this process, making you walk through the process of learning, will ensure your placement. This is what we say. So, but then what Carles says is, this leads to that learning orientation, oriented assessment, which looks at assessment as learning. That means when we assess, it's a learning for the student. Again, student involvement, when students are involved in the individual and the group, in the group assignments that we give, or in the group presentations that we give, this involvement has peer and self-review. We ask them, okay, what do you think about your presentation? Do you think you have done well? Or what do you think where you could have done better? So there's a self-evaluation that goes on as far as the learning-oriented assessment is concerned, because of the involvement. And the peers are there to tell them what are all those points that he or she has missed? So feedback as, feed forward. So a feedback is definitely given in when the assessment is done, and this is something which will be taken forward for their improvement. So when we talk about, well, if this is what is the framework, how do we design the task? It is the teacher's challenge to design the task. And it's a theory which is again, given by Dix and Tang in 2007, where they talk about, assessment tasks and teaching learning activities. These are designed to ensure that students achieve the intended learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are extremely important, and they develop cognitive skills at a range of levels. We will just discuss that, in the next slide. So how do we design the task? We design the task in such a way that the learning outcome is very important. In India, for example, it is mandated today for making each course outcome based. We follow the outcome based, education, as it is called, where we talk about the intended learning outcomes, and then we try to see that they develop skills on one side of it, but the assessment is tuned towards the outcome. So in the outcome based education, OBE as it is called, it is the intended outcomes vis-a-vis the assessment, that is tuned to see these outcomes have been met. So the learning outcomes for a topic or a unit are the criteria where we make judgment about the student learning. Whenever we talk about, the criteria, etc., the first thing that comes to our mind is the Bloom's taxonomy. He was very right. Professor Cornell also spoke about, the Bloom's taxonomy. When we talk about this, the assessment is done on the knowledge and intellectual abilities and skills. So when we talk about, knowledge, it is when we talk about knowledge and when we assess them on the knowledge parameter, it is the recall. That means recall of the specifics, the specifics that we have discussed in the class, and also the knowledge of the ways and means of dealing with those specifics. For example, if I talk about the change, if I talk about change, then they have to talk about what is so specific in that change, given an example, or what is it that makes change different. So that different, that word has to come out, that specific word has to come out when we are trying to make them recall the knowledge that they had achieved as far as the recall is concerned. Then they have also to talk about ways and means. What are the ways and means for that change that has taken place in an organization? If technology has been changed, then what are the ways and means? Is it the architecture? Is it the training? Is it bringing in new people? What are the ways and means through which that change has taken place? Well, they have also to kind of recall the universal and abstractions in the field, the knowledge of universals and abstractions in the field. When we talk about universality, then they have to bring about the global picture. If this has happened, if technology change has happened, and this is how it has happened, by putting in more infrastructure, changing the architecture, changing a platform, or changing a version, or whatever it is, they should also be, they should also be able to recall the universal picture or the global picture, as Professor Cornell has also spoken about. So the second most important thing that is tested is the intellectual abilities and skills. So while we test as teachers the intellectual abilities and skills, the first that comes to us is a comprehension. That means the low level of understanding or ability to grasp and make use of material ideas, without seeing further implications. That means, what do we understand by that? That means, what is a comprehension level? Not everybody. If I have 25 students in my class, then not everybody has the comprehension at the same level, because this is influenced by the intellectual ability and the skills that they get. So is it low level of understanding? Then what is the ability of the person to grasp, and then how is he making use of the ideas or the material that has been given, so on and so forth. This is where I think the comprehension comes into the picture. As far as comprehension is concerned, the student has also to kind of translate what he is able to comprehend, interpret what he is able to comprehend, and also extrapolate to the situation or to the scenario that has been given by the teacher. So this is as far as comprehension is concerned. The next most important thing is application. Definitely, when we talk about the skills of a manager, we say manager requires the conceptual skills, the application skills, analytical skills. So if that is the case, when we talk about application, well, it is use of abstractions in specific situations. So when we talk about any problem, can I go ahead?
No problem. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. So this is when we talk about application. How is it that a student is able to apply whatever he has done? A theory, for example, maybe Kurt Lewin, Kurt Lewin's restraining forces and driving forces. So if that is the case, whatever driving forces, he should be able to apply when a scenario. Then comes, the analysis part of it. Definitely analytical skills are very important. He or she should be able to kind of break it down into constituent elements, and then he should be able to kind of establish the relationship between those, and then talk about in a hierarchy of ideas. So that is where the analysis skills really come into the picture. Then comes synthesis. We always talk about students when we tell them that they have to structure elements so that they are able to form a pattern. They're able to form a pattern or understand that a pattern is emerging. So this is where they have to synthesize, and then when we talk about when they synthesize, this is where it becomes very important for them to kind of structure those elements into that pattern which is emerging, and they should be able to really know about it. Then comes this synthesis has to be communicated very well, and then it has to kind of not only communicated, but it has to also be told as a plan or a proposed set of operations or activities that he or she does, and then the relations between each of those. The last one is the evaluation part of it, which is both qualitative and quantitative judgments of the procedure or the idea or the appraisal, etc., to satisfy that criteria. So when we say judgments, what are the internal evidence that they have, like what Professor Cornell says, this is a material, this is a case. So what is it that you have in terms of the evidence that is there or facts of the case, and judgments in terms of the external criteria. So this is where I think the taxonomy helps us in not only understanding but also making them go through or walk through this process, and this helps in the our assessment. So when we talk about online assessment, and when we talk about when we talk about Bloom's taxonomy for that matter, all those levels, level 1 to all those levels that we have seen, students would demonstrate knowledge, they would comprehend, then they would apply, they would analyze, they would synthesize, and they will also evaluate the validity of information before whatever is given to them. So when it comes to online assessment and what are those techniques, Professor Cornell's slide was very clear. Well, the first and foremost is what we very normally use, which is, the MCQs, the multiple choice questions. These are, these are used to, test the factual, conceptual, and the procedural information. Then there is something called, multiple response questions. These are slightly different, and they ask students to choose multiple options. See here, both are same, but then it has more than one correct answer. So the students have to choose multiple options from a list of possible options answers, and usually there is more than one correct answer for the multiple response questions. Then of course, the fill in the blanks that we always use. These are constructed, responses. Typically, one-word answers, is what is required from the students, where they create an answer, and then that is what it is. True or false, again, is dichotomous, either or, in nature, and this also tests the factual, information. Then comes, matching. Well, match the following is what we normally use, and it is very appropriate for assessing the student understanding of the information that he is seeking. Something like, terms and definitions. You give a term and then you give a definition, and they should be able to match. They would be able to match only when they understand it, or some events, some dates, or some tool and its uses, so on and so forth could be some of the examples. Then comes essays. Essays are the only, question types that can assess the higher levels of, students' mastery. That means the synthesis and evaluation levels is what comes here in the essay. So this is extremely important. And when we talk about grading, most of them are automatically graded, excepting essays where we have to manually grade. All test knowledge, comprehension, applications. Essays also test, the synthesis and analysis. When it comes to tools, this is where, there are traditional, these are the tools, the type, the example, and the tools, which, Professor Cornell has also spoken about. For example, in our university, the university has immediately, in about March, we declared the lockdown, and in about May, a learning management system for use of, the entire university was made. And this is where, there is a lot of training that has been given to all faculty, and this training was also given to the students so that they are familiar and conversant with the use of learning management system. So when we talk about traditional assessment, which is submitted online, we have something called, we normally use essays, we use case studies in these schools, we use, article reviews, we do proposal writing, report writing, etc. These are all, the traditional assessments that are submitted online. LMS is a very good, platform. Then online marking and, feedback. These are the tools one can use. Automated online assessment. Well, all these, we use MCQ. It's automatically, graded. So anything that we decide can go into, the automated online assessment. LMS again is good. Examination assessment software is also there. There are many products which are now available in our market, which could be used for, any software can easily do the assessment of, this. Well, invigilated online assessment. When we talk about, invigilated online assessment, it's a midterm exam and the final exam where we are sitting and we ask them to switch on their videos so that we are able to look at, them while they are writing. And then, that's also, online. Online interaction. Well, as he rightly said, chats, blogs, clubs, collaborative learning, critical reviews, these are all examples. And then, LMS helps and there are blogs which can be, which can be seen, then Google Docs is also a very good tool as far as the online interaction is concerned. Group assessment online, I found Google Docs very, very useful as far as the online interaction is concerned. Group assessment online, well, when we talk about group assessment, definitely online presentations, which are individual and group, they're one is leading, the other one is looking at it, and there are also group work which is assigned by the teacher, and one of them will present, that. There are role plays in OB and HR. I think role plays really help them understand, the concept. Online discussion and debates. Again, LMS has a very good, the LMS that we have is all powerful, which has a lot. There are YouTube videos, etc., which could be used. Again, Google Docs helps. Then comes, reflective activities. Reflect on what is your learning from the course. So this is something which is extremely important. The entire course, what is your reflection? And, how do you reflect and how do you, forward it for the teacher to see how best, you can done, how best you can improvise in the next semester. So LMS again helps in that. There is also peer assessment tools that are available which also do this. Then comes, when we talk about, tips, like face-to-face class, we have a range of options for assessments. Well, when we talk about, formative feedback, that is, educative assessment, well, we are educating the student while giving the immediate, specific, and, forward-looking feedback. And this really, helps them as to how to improve in the future, especially, when we talk about, future work. How do you want to use this in the work? A lot of feedback is given so that when they transit from a student to an employee, this is what they are, taking it forward, so that this helps them, in future. Well, formative online course. When we talk about formative online courses, the examples are mostly discussion activities, role plays, especially OBHR. There are also web, questions that could be asked. Research projects, definitely. Every MBA will have a short-term project at the end of second semester, and we also have a research project at the end of the fourth semester. So there is teamwork, there is self-assessment, there is peer review. There is a lot of analysis of data, which also, tests on a range of levels. The next one is a summative online course for which, the examples are, well, online tests, quizzes, final, assignment submissions. We give it, for example, all of us give the assignment, which is more in terms of a term paper level, where they have to maybe, we give instructions as teachers. Choose a company, look at how they have, if it is a management of change course, choose a company, then, ask them to see how change is defined. They can also, talk about the method, that they had followed. Is it business process reengineering? Is it, mergers acquisition, as to how they have changed? What is a form? Whether they had individual, they had group exercises in order to manage change. How did they evaluate change? What is the role of the change agent? Who was the change agent, etc., in the final, assignment submission. So, well, final assessment, invigilated on site also. There are assessments that they sit down and write, which the teacher also, invigilates, for which there is a special software there's a special, platform on the LMS which we use. Then auditive assessment, summative evaluation with limited feedback, and this is, something which is, what is already achieved is given as a feedback, to them, where we give a summary of what is already over. Then how do we as teachers support student learning? When we talk about, um, supporting supporting the students and their learning, um, we always think about, auditive examples like MCQs or, on-site final exams that are still, commonly used in distance and online courses. This is one thing. Second is student orientation. So, when we talk about success in, the assessment components of a course, if the assessment is successful, then we as teachers must facilitate a student-centered and an engaging online course. So that we can ensure the student orientation and we can support their learning. Then it also necessitates, a corresponding rethinking, a realignment of our assessment process to match learning outcomes. I'll give you a template that, we use after, we talk about this. So how can we as teachers designing a learning process that help our students develop higher order thinking skills, which require, which not only require understanding extra, but which require reflection, which require application, maybe an analysis, and integrating it, as a wholesome experience. So how do we do that? Rather than, we can do this by making, rather than thinking of instruction and testing as two separate processes, we assess our students on actual learning, tasks facilitated within, the online, environment in a matter that's authentic and relevant to them. That is, for example, interviews. That means how do we make it more authentic? That means what they actually learn. It is not, instruction is not separate and, testing is not separate. But then we assess students on the actual learning, actual task that we have given as part of their learning, and we try to, kind of look at them, how they are able to authentically use them and how it is relevant to use them. For example, in interviews, when they give, when they test their understanding of a concept by giving a scenario, they should be able to do that. So it is more of, integrating instruction and testing as, not looking at two separate processes, but as one. Online courses are very useful in improving digital literacy, which are very, very important for the, present day, for the contemporary graduates. Well, educative assessments integrate learning and evaluation, uh, uh, integrates, learning and evaluation for an engaging student-centered experience. So what is more important is the experience of the student and nothing else. But then what is more important is when we talk about the values, when we talk about standards, when we talk about, the whatever we imbibe as culture for the students, how do we ensure the academic integrity of students? So this is very important, and this can be done in the entire online course, life cycle. So here are some ways in which we can ensure course assignment and assessment. In the course assignment and assessment design, we can see how do we engage students in a variety of activities. It's not just, one activity, but how do we make the activities many more? How do we weight course assessments to decrease stakes on a single component? It's not just one, but then how do we divide it? Say if I'm giving 50 marks for continuous assessment, how do I divide it? One is 10, one is 12, one is 8, one is, another 10, so on and so forth, so that not one single component has, highest weightage. Reflect a process that incorporates scaffolding or sequential, work. So when we talk about that, how do we sequence this? How do we sequence this from the lower order to the higher order, so that they are able to really, go strength in strength from lower order to the higher order ones. Design open book and collaborative assessment. That is what we are doing as of now. How are we doing it? We are absolutely designing, the open book and collaborative assessments. The second most important way in which we can ensure the integrity of students is the orientation for students. That means in the orientation that we give a kit where we highlight the policies which we get from the ministry, and also the policies that the university has. And we also tell them what are all those academic resources as support resources from the university. And we create a culture. We talk about, how the School of Management family has a culture and how they should also be part and parcel of that. So the orientation of students is very important, where we highlight all these so that they are, at least told what is in store, for them. Then during this assessment process, also we can ensure the academic integrity. Well, by monitoring student performance across multiple assignments, it's not just one. There's a lot of use of, plagiarism software also. For example, Turnitin is what we use for the term papers. They have to, it is a policy of the university to get the term paper, to get the assignment, go through the Turnitin software and then submit it. So along with the report. So this is something which is, while, the process of assessment is on, they're told they have to do it and then submit the report. This is also true for the PhD thesis that gets submitted to the university. Then ensure online, term tests and quizzes using the learning management system, features such as randomization and, time limits. So this is where the LMS comes into, the rescue. Then the final thing is examination, the final examination part. The on-site exam invigilation is also supported by university by a, if it's a fully online course, as we are doing it now, the university takes care of whatever we need in order to make it, fully invigilated one. As I said earlier, it is very important to see that the intended, learning objectives are, fully aligned with the assessment tasks that we give. Say, for example, if I give I take the performance management course, which is a HR elective. So one of the learning outcome is to come out with a form to assess the performance of maybe a HR executive, so, or a HR manager, or an operations manager. Then, if that is the intended learning outcome, the assessment task, the first assessment task should be such that, as I said, it should be broken down into pieces. So the first assessment task is to, he or she cannot just go ahead, preparing a form. So in order to prepare a form, which is my intended learning outcome for this course, then one has to first know the task of identifying the key result areas. Once that is done, my AP2, which is the assignment task, the assessment task, is to go with the indicators which would help the individual to achieve those key result areas. The third one would be what kind of a training would be needed in order to kind of go ahead in the career or to improve the performance. So these are all assessment tasks that I would give, starting from identifying the KRAs to identifying the KPIs to identifying the training requirement and taking the feedback and counseling, so on and so forth, so that all this makes up as to how that student would be able to come out with my intended learning outcome, which is the, coming out with a form, an assessment form, a performance assessment appraisal form for HR executive or for the HR manager. So that way, what is more important is how do we align? Assessment must be finally, aligned with intended learning outcomes for meaningful results with the assessment tasks that we have on hand. In conclusion, I would like to cap it off by saying that online teaching, learning, this has come to stay. It is going to stay for some more time. And we have to have a strategy as to how we would go on with online teaching and learning, and how we would strategize for the online assessment, which is extremely important. This is not new to the education sector. Not that this is new to the education sector. Our response has been immediate, but then considering the situation, but then this was used long back, right from the days when we were using the distance learning mode. So the usage, it shot the prominence because of the unusual circumstances, but online assessment, which is part of the teaching learning process, is extremely important in order to see that the teaching learning process is complete and comprehensive because of the assessment that is made clear to the student. Well, technology has helped us a lot. It revolutionized the design and delivery to such an extent that I think the LMS really comes to our rescue most of the time. Well, it's a challenge, no doubt, to the institution, to the teachers, to the students. The response, at least in India, has been quite decent. Although, we hear mixed experiences depending upon the resources that are there in the institutions. As, Professor, Anwar Hussain has said, the private universities have taken a good leap forward. We public universities with good resources like ours, we have taken it, in the stride. We're all fine with having invested a lot of, resources on the infrastructure. But then, there are the institutions which are not able to really come up, especially as he rightly said, the public universities. But this is definitely going to be a norm for some more time. We don't know when, what, etc. But this definitely is going to be the trend. Although we don't know when we will go back to, or we have to adjust it to the new normal. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. How do I stop it?
Thank you, Professor Shita, for your valuable discussions on online assessment.
Thank you,
now,
sir.
Now the floor is open. Floor is open for question. If you have, my dear colleagues, if you have any questions to our resource persons, then you can ask.
Is it there in the chat box?
Yes, chat box. I don't see any question.
There's no question here. Or somebody can read out the question if it is there.
I have a few queries to Professor Francisco Cornell. Professor Cornell, you know that in United States, in assessment and evaluation, students' performance evaluation, you ensure that the grades of a class should not be abnormal. That means normal, not exactly normal distribution, but should not be abnormal. But now, under this pandemic situation in this online system, how can we ensure this normal distribution in our grading in class?
You said normal. I couldn't get exactly what you're saying.
I wanted to say that we don't want that in a class. When we grade, the grade should not be abnormal. It should be
Oh,
normal.
yeah.
And sometimes we use normal curve to
Yeah,
ensure the fairness in grading. So
right.
in this online assessment system, how can we, you know that there are so many drawbacks and so many things are around. So under this circumstances, how can we ensure this fairness by ensuring what should I say, normal distribution in our class when we grade?
Okay. That's a very, very difficult question, very personal, because, you know, I'm a very demanding professor, okay? So I have like 30 years of experience at this university. So I have seen like the best and the worst. So I have an idea of what is the best student and what is the worst student. So I have, and then the intermediate, so like a normal curve, as you say. But in this time of pandemics, as you probably will see today, our students, our listeners are multitasking. They are not in the classroom. Therefore, there is so many distractions. Okay, there is so many distractions, and the world, in general, the world has become a distracted world. I see people in the street crossing the street where there is traffic, and they are like this. They're walking like this. Okay, so they are driving, and then they are shouting at the boyfriend, the girlfriend. They are upset. This society is different, so we have to understand that. So the level of normality has changed, and I have to take the hit. You see, this past semester, I had to extend the curve on the lower side. Otherwise, these students would not graduate. However, I gave them alternatives, you see, because in my test, they couldn't perform very well in the problem test. So I had to give them other assignments, and I had to tailor to their passion, their experiences, and kind of individualize. So I don't know how other faculty, that is why I put some questions to some of the professors, and I said, for example, MD Masudul Hake, I know he's expert in mathematics, so that is different from my field, okay? I know Professor Mohammed Masharov, he's an expert in chemistry. I know Professor Nassim Akhtar, you have a dental surgeon teaching there. So those experiences are different from mine. So maybe their definition of normality is different in each field. Okay, so if they want to participate, I welcome that. That's my approach when I teach. I make sure that my students are paying attention. I make sure that the audience is paying attention. And so that gives a contribution. Thank you, Professor Nazrul.
And another question, Professor Cornell, to you, asked by Salahuddin Ahmed. What is your suggestion for the students as how to keep them engaged in academic activities in these pandemic times?
You have to bring the fear of God if you want some collaboration, because as I told you, there is so many things that are that are attracting them. So I guess in your society, you have to bring the fear of Allah, but here we have to bring the fear. In my class, I bring the fear of Coronel. I have a reputation, you see. I have a reputation. So that helps me. But on the other hand, that reputation alone is not enough. As Dr. Sita Vanka said, it is a student-centered approach, and there's multiple, a variety. There is a plethora of strategies that you can use. So when you see her PowerPoint, you will see how successful she has been. And I have been somewhat successful, but I'm still dissatisfied because I'm a traditional teacher. You see, I'm a traditional teacher. I like to see my students. I like to talk to my students. I want to almost see their eyes and then see. But it's a different environment, and it's a challenge for all of us. Okay, it's a different challenge. We have to look for activities that are relevant to your audience. I remember, and I won't mention the name of this professor that came from Bangladesh. I was a visiting professor at my university. I mean, this distinguished scholar, he spoke British English of a high level. And when he came to Hampton University, Professor Nazrul Islam, our students are African American. They talk English, but different English.
Yeah.
So I had to ask this eminence who has PhD from Great Britain. I said, Doc, you got to learn African American English. And he did. He watched movies by African American with their intonation. So he no longer used the word schedule. He said schedule.
Okay.
So you got to connect with your students however you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the
Thank you.
US, every English term has an alternative term. Every English term has an alternative, term, which you should automatically, get it once you are on that soil. Once you come back, people won't understand here if you talk that kind of English and that terminology. That is how, the problem is when
Thank you.
you're dealing with courses at two different, locations, at least geographies.
Yeah.
I
Thank you,
think
ma'am.
one thing that, a teacher can really have the attention of students. I sit here and start teaching. I was telling Professor Cornell in the morning that I had a 3-hour session. So if after every slide, like what we do in our distance courses, after some time you say, okay, activity 1, activity 2, or recall this, so on and so forth, which makes them get engaged because they know it is continuous assessment. This 3 hours is also being assessed. So then it has to be, they have to be in the class. Otherwise, it's not possible.
Hello, can you mute the mic, administrator? Please mute the mic of that faculty who is talking. Anyway, thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Cornell. I have another, what should I say, not question, to Professor Shita. We talk about the unfairness of our students. They are not engaged. They are not fair. They are not attentive to learn. They only prefer grade and so on and so forth. But my question is, in this pandemic situation, in this pandemic environment, when everything is online, we are teaching online, we are grading online, everything is online. In this environment, don't you think that there might have a question of unfairness from the evaluator side, from the faculty side? And if it is the case, we see that average grading is given, average. That means not evaluated exactly. Under this situation, what can be done to overcome this problem?
Well, fairness, unfairness, I think, is something as a teacher, our personal value should be over and above that. Number one, we should be, as a teacher, we should be over and above being fair or unfair to any particular individual. Every student, any student is class in the class is somebody who is treated equally. Number one. Number two is having that personal ethic. I think, second, what we can do is probably, as you said, some of the students are extremely good. You are automatically, tuned towards them, no doubt about it. So, but I think we have to have our, ears and eyes open all the time because, well, once, twice, thrice, four times, maybe in about 40 classes, maybe first 30 classes, they must have been extremely good. So they win your confidence. You can be blind to, whatever, they say in the 31st class. That I think, we should not be. We should keep our eyes, ears open and then, read everything without knowing who, that person is here, without really keeping who, is really telling that point or anything. But then we should stick to our, principles of assessment of the highest assessment. Higher assessment will be given if it leads to class learning. Whatever we have the criteria, we should be, we should stick to that and probably grade there. And then right there, why we have given less for that student who's been a topper throughout. Probably it is up to us. It is, I think, we as teachers should imbibe that, quality of rising above the personal level and, be fair.
But
Yeah.
from an institutional point of view, we see there is a deviation. We observe that there is a deviation, but from institutional point of view or from ethical point of view or from other point of view, what can be done? I think it is a challenge now.
It's a challenge. Yeah. From an institutional point of view, yes, like what, we had discussed now, maybe, maybe assess on, smaller, amounts of your, which cumulatively goes into the grade on smaller, I would say amount of marks. Okay, say instead of 20 for one, give 5, 5, 5, 5, so that you're spacing that.
Breakdown.
Okay, this is one thing. Yeah, breaking it. Breaking this is what is told to us by our, university. Okay. You can't have whatever we have earlier in the face-to-face. It's totally different from what we are here. So a lot of research, a lot of thinking has gone from the institutional side to lay standards. And then we get those guidelines.
Right.
Given that guidelines and given that framework, we have our own, academic freedom. But then we should be able to convince.
Right. Thank you, madam. So, Professor Cornell, would you like to add anything?
Yes. All the ideas that Dr. Vanka has projected are excellent. My approach is to engage the students and apply the concept that Dr. Sita Vanka has used, make it compartmentalized little by little. Some assignments I value at 0, the quizzes, okay, because they can do it, but it gives already the knowledge part, and they like to see the 25 out of 25, that helps them, but that counts for 0 for the grade. But it gives me an idea if they are following or not the material. At the end of the semester, not even at the middle of the semester, I give the midterm grade, where those students who are not even doing that part, I said, look, if you continue this approach, you're not learning the basics, and then you need to, then, as I told you before, I did not like Blackboard because Blackboard only allowed me to see 2 students. And in this particular webinar, I bet you I was boring to maybe 10, 20, 30 of your faculty. Why? Because I cannot be as effective communicator. I don't have, it takes more time to communicate our ideas, to express our ideas than to be on the whiteboard, the blackboard, or the PowerPoint when there is more interaction physically. So a lot of our audience turns off, okay? They are multitasking. So my approach is to use Zoom. And in Zoom, I can see their faces. I require that everybody is on their camera. It's a requirement. So I have the support of the president. My chair said she's very young, you know, so my chair said, oh, no. In New York, they don't allow the students to be seen because whatever. So I said, well, we're not in New York, so fine. So sometimes the young faculty may be afraid of what's going on. So don't be afraid. If you're allowed to use Zoom, I encourage you to use Zoom. I encourage you to use some other ways. Now, I don't want to be insincere. Teaching online takes more time, more effort.
Yes.
To learn. The curve is steep, but once you get to do that, then you appreciate the value of this. As a matter of fact, I used to give quizzes, but it cost me a lot because I had to type all these questions and then I have to use the Escantron machine. I had to go to a place where I use the Escantron machine and I have to, now we have such a methodology that all this can be graded online, okay? So I'm not going back to this control machine. And I told the president, look, we are gonna say money on paper. And guess what? The administrators like it. Whenever you say money, they say, we like it, okay? So there are different techniques. I use movies, I use books, as I told you, literature fiction books, and they pick the books. You see, they pick the books. So right there, it's their enthusiasm.
Thank you, Professor. I think we have arrived at the last stage of our today's webinar. I would like to summarize the whole discussions today. Both of you made in front of our all faculty members of Northern University, Bangladesh. It was really a value-adding discussion and useful discussions for all of us. Professor Cornell, he from the beginning identified the assessment process by using 4 fundamental steps in his lecture. He wanted to say that the steps are the deciding on what a student will be able to know and do as a result from instruction requires writing learning objectives. The second steps he wanted to say that create or find ways to measure the extent to which students have met those objectives. And continuous improvement he also focused. And the third steps, fundamental steps, he wanted to mention in the assessment process is planning of instructional strategies. Is guided by your asking how does this event, activity, or approach help the student achieve the objective. And the fourth step is mentioned that an emphasis on improving learning is the aim of the final step, in which we provide feedback to students to help them improve their learning. Specifically, Professor Cornell mentioned objectives are related to intended instructional outcomes. That is, he focused on outcome, and that is very specific and measurable. That is, that outcome must be specific and measurable. And if it is not specific, we must make it specific. If it is not measurable, we must make it measurable. And he also mentioned that objectives are also concerned with the students' learning. So these are very specific objectives are mentioned by Professor Francisco Cornell in assessment process. He also mentioned Bloom's taxonomy and online assessment methods. He mentioned that we all of us know that Bloom mentioned the 6 steps: remembering, understanding, memorizing, understanding, analyzing, then applying, evaluating, and creating. He mentioned that in Bloom's taxonomy, there are 4 areas: knowledge, that is memorizing. He mentioned that this memorizing knowledge can be assessed by using multiple choice questions, true, false, matching, fill in the blanks, short answer, flashcards, games, and quizzes. Comprehension skill, that means understanding skill can be assessed by using simulations, animations, and tutorials. Application skills can be assessed by multiple choice, short answer, essays, tutorials, simulations, games, case studies. And analysis or synthesis and evaluation can be assessed by using multiple choice questions, essays, projects, portfolio, simulations, presentation, paper, virtual lab, case studies, and so on. Professor Cornell also mentioned types of assessment. He mentioned 2 types of assessment can be used here: formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment will provides instructors and students with timely and frequent feedback on mastery of course material and learning objectives. And summative assessment results are used to assign students grades and make comprehensive conclusions about mastery of course learning objectives. Also, Professor Cornell mentioned that formative assessment can be like, for example, discussion, blog, that also mentioned by Professor Shita, board, chat, quiz. Formative and summative assessment together can be done by using case study, paper, self-assessment, simulation, animation, reflective journal, virtual lab, game. And summative assessment can be done by using project, portfolio, and presentation. So, Professor Cornell, your lecture was highly valuable, and it was really learning for us, for our faculty members. And I believe that this lecture will be useful for us for enhancing our assessment ability at Northern University, Bangladesh. Thank you, Professor Francisco Cornell, for attending this seminar, giving your valuable time and sharing your valuable experience with our colleagues with us. Thank you, sir. Professor Shita, he started saying that assessment is a crucial element to enhance our teaching quality. That is really, you are very correct. It is really a crucial element. If we are unable to assess correctly, then the whole thing will be destroyed. So it is a dual thing, not only teaching, it is also assessment. Both the things you mentioned, double duty of a faculty member, double duty. Not only teaching, a person can be a good teacher, but may not be a good evaluator, good assessor. But he must be a good teacher, at the same time must be good assessor or good evaluator. Students learning, Professor Shita also mentioned, the student learning depends on extent on how they think. How they think, what about their thinking, why they are here. So we can stimulate their thinking, and we can stimulate them to engage in class by introducing diversified activity-based assignments and projects. Professor Shita also mentioned that if we see from a student perspective, the student's demand is to get the grade and degree. But if you look at it from the teacher point of view, then it is double duty. That means grade and also learning. That means that faculty must give the fair grade to the students, must evaluate the students properly. At the same time, must ensure that the students and learner really learn from this class. And it was really outcome based, and the objective was achieved by the faculty member. Professor Shita also answered some questions of why assessment. She mentioned that it has got multiple purposes, like providing feedback on learning. There are some students who want to know what about their performance they want to improve, what about their weakness. So if we can give the feedback, then they will be able to correct and they will learn. Then facilitating the improvement, we can facilitate the improvements of the students learning, and measuring the achievement, motivating learning, and maintaining the standards. So these are the few purposes mentioned by Professor Shita and purposes of assessment. Professor Shita also mentioned that to assess properly or perfectly, we need to design our task in such a way so that it will help us to assess properly and to assess as unbiasedly. She mentioned that design to ensure the outcome. So one of the purposes of designing task is to ensure the outcome, that is learning outcome, and develop cognitive skills. That means our task designing main purpose is to ensure or achieve the learning outcome and improve the cognitive skills of the students. She also mentioned Bloom's taxonomy, which is based on cognitive skills like memorizing, knowledge, understanding, there is comprehension, analyzing, applying. And she also mentioned that under intellectual abilities and skills are tested under comprehension part, and evaluating and synthesizing or creating. And Professor Shita also mentioned that online assessment techniques can be like MCQ. We can use MCQ in assessing online, or AMRQ, that means multiple response questions, multiple choice questions. At the same time, multiple response questions we can use. Fill in the blanks, that was also mentioned by Professor Cornell. And true false, these are the matching questions, essay. These all are the similar issues mentioned by both the speakers today this evening. And also Professor Shita mentioned some assessment tools. That was really interesting, and I think it was built in LMS, Learning Management System, in University of Hyderabad. She mentioned that online marking and feedback. So by using LMS, then exam assessment software can be used. Then LMS and blocks and Google Docs can be used. Then YouTube, Google Docs, and peer assessment. These are the tools we can use in assessing our students. Professor Shita also gave some tips to our to the audience, that she mentioned that the educative assessment, that is formative feedback, that is immediate and specific and forward looking. So educative assessment, then formative online course, then summative online course, and additive assessment. So these are a few tips given by Professor Shita. She also mentioned that how to support our students' learning. So we must APR in front of our learners as mentor, as guide. That means we need to support them, because on the other end, we don't know what problems they are facing. That is why we need to help them. We need to support them, facilitate them, so that they can come up, they can come forward, and they can learn. So thank you, Professor Shita, for raising so many nice issues and valuable issues on online assessment in this pandemic situation. Thank you very much for giving your valuable thoughts and giving your valuable time with us, and sharing your experience. And with this, we can conclude by saying that we know that the COVID-19 forced us to move to distance teaching and learning. It also created important opportunities to propose more flexible learning possibilities, explore blended or hybrid learning system, but we need to adapt it. Online learning is not about one pedagogical model, but an aggregation of various models. So the former one we used was teacher-centric one, and the latter one, it is learner-centric. The online one is learner-centric. Therefore, even in the post-COVID-19 era, that means new normal situation, offline or conventional education models will not become obsolete. They will survive, I think. However, blended learning and assessment, that means combination of classroom and online modes, will be the norm in coming days. Institutions and faculty members will blend the two judiciously accordingly to the context and the content by solving the concerns of the stakeholders about the quality of education and assessment systems. With this, I would like to extend my thanks and appreciation again to this senior professor and resource person for giving a long time with us and sharing your valuable experience with us. Thank you, sir and ma'am, very much for attending with us. So, Farzana, you can conclude.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words.
Dr.
We are
Nazrul,
As always.
Dr. Nazrul, as always, you are bringing the best to anywhere where you go. And when you invited me, I couldn't say no. You are an outstanding researcher. You're a machine that publishes. I don't know how you do it. You probably don't sleep. And then you are a very able administrator, very, the French say, charmant. You're very nice.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much for the compliments.
Faculty, I was looking at the, well, that's why I asked the question to those particular people. And many of your faculty are outstanding. They have won the Holt Prize. They have won the different prizes in Bangladesh and all over the world. I think you are like the Stanford of Bangladesh. I recall a long time ago, Stanford went like that, and it's a private university. And I congratulate your faculty and through you. And I also want to express my appreciation to Dr. Sita Vanka, because I don't know the culture of Bangladesh, and she knows.
Thank you, sir.
More than me. And she gave me some points, and I hope I haven't not broken any cultural issues with this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Farzana, over to you.
We are at the end part of our today's webinar. Heartfelt gratitude to our honorable resource persons. All the faculty members have participated in today's session, and all of us must agree that we have learned a lot from your valuable ideas. Thank you very much. Thank you to the honorable guests and those persons who actually make this event so successful. Special thanks to Dr. Faria Rabbi, who actually coordinate the overall webinar. Benazir Rahman, the honorable host, Abdullah Muhammad Ibrahim, Tausif Shafayat Ali, and the entire team of organizer. Me, Farzana Chaudhary, wish you a very safe and prosperous life. Thank you once again. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now you can stop recording. We can have a photograph. My dear colleagues, can you please on your camera for a photograph purpose? Yes. Please.
Yes, sir.
Can we?
Yeah, please on your camera. Okay, now we can see the face.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.